It's the first time I do an event myself here at FTC, French Tech Central. What is it?
You waited for the right time, I
Yeah,
see.
perfect timing.
So French Tech Central is a really special place. It is essentially the headquarters of La French Tech. And it is also this very special sort of bridge between French government and all of the administrations in it and startups. So the idea was that, hey, you know what? Whether we like it or not, government is part of a startups, whether it's when they're creating their company, when they're getting visas, when they're applying for funding through BPI. And instead of telling the startups to come to the government, we decided to take government to the startups. And that's kind of like the story behind French Tech Central.
And you have offices upstairs as well, right?
Yep.
So your roles at French Tech has evolved. I think, for how long have you been as a director of French Tech?
Almost 3 full years.
3, 4 years.
Yeah.
Are you like in scaling mode now? Like you've done already a bunch of work and now you're like moving faster and growing faster? What is it that you feel after 3 years of being a director of French Tech?
Wow. Well, it hasn't been an ordinary 3 years. Let's put it that way, right? So, I mean, definitely the first couple of years were about putting in place the new French Tech system, the new team with the new programs. So, just maybe as like a sort of background, when French Tech was first created in 2013 by Fleur Perrin, who was then the Minister for Digital, its goal was really to do two things. One, to put an end to French bashing in tech, mostly by French people, as you know, especially abroad. And the second was to really introduce startups as, like as a story, like what is it, why are they important, and things like that. So it was really like the early evangelization days. And then when I came in, the world had already changed, and my job was mostly to make sure that the switch from startup to scale up and from scale up to unicorn, from unicorn to global tech champion happens a lot more smoothly. So that we put in place a lot of those programs, and then COVID happened, and you can guess what we were doing during then.
And that's the situation you are now.
Yeah. I mean, well, now we're really like, fully focused on making sure that French Tech is really one of, the core drivers of the French recovery.
I don't know if everybody is aware of this, but France was the most active hub for startup investment in 2020.
Yeah, 5.4 billion raised total.
Why?
Well, I think it's like there are definitely different factors. One is that a lot of those numbers are also explained by the series of mega rounds that we had last year. So, I remember when I first started in 2017, there was one number in particular that really broke my heart. And that number was the graduation rate at Series C, which way back then was like 1%. And then, so, if you're looking at the numbers of the French tech ecosystem, if you're looking at like the total amount raised, you didn't see a lot of like growth stage rounds then. And now it's like, every couple of, I feel like every couple of weeks or so, we're announcing different mega rounds. So there's a lot of that powered that. And I think, a lot of it is also due to the fact that, I mean, it's an ecosystem that really pulled together during the crisis. I mean, the government did not let anybody down. Immediately after the lockdown, when I say immediately, I mean like 24 hours after the lockdown was announced, Cedric O, our Minister for Digital, already like took the mic and said 4.3. We're putting 4.3 billion on the table to make sure that we preserve like the French tech ecosystem. We believe in French tech entrepreneurship, and we're going to let the crisis take it down.
Do you have like some other metrics than beyond just the founding level of 2020 that shows that, the French ecosystem was very active, was still growing, maybe in terms of employment?
I mean, in terms of employment, so it's hard to count like all 15,000 startups without like a clear definition of what that is, but I can tell you for like the top 120 companies. So if you put together just the top 120 companies, French tech startups in France from really all across the country, you're looking at job creation rate close to 25% net, and roughly 11,000 jobs that will be created in 2021, 2022.
That's crazy. So with this beautiful situation, let's say, what are then the issues and challenges for French entrepreneurs? Like, it sounds like amazing to be entrepreneurs in France, but maybe there are still issues or challenges that you are fighting and working.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely like the crisis has had a different impact on different companies depending what sector they're in, right? And I won't go into what startups in the tourism industry are facing versus startups in cybersecurity, but what I can say is that the numbers are pretty steady in terms of growth. It's changed. I think it's it's changed the chessboard quite a lot in terms of who's growing, how, when, and so right now what I can see is that you can see startups that are moving really really quickly, and their challenges right now are hiring. Massive challenge.
Talent, number one challenge.
Talent is always I think is always going to be a challenge for any ecosystem that's doing well, right? It's like, but yeah, it's particularly a challenge right now as people don't know if they're going to hire remotely. How do everybody wants a really strong and international team. How are we going to do that during the crisis? How do you do employer branding to a certain extent in times like these, and so on. And then of course, you still have lots of challenges that people are trying to figure out on international expansion in the middle of a crisis as well. How does that work? To what extent? How does that change the playbook? So basically, all the playbooks that have ever been written kind of like go up in smoke, and now everybody is like inventing everything again from scratch.
Actually, that's something super interesting. I was talking with one of the, I think next 40 maybe startup, and they want to hire developers, a lot of them, but they want to hire them in Paris. So zero remote, hiring.
So actually, close to 70% of the next 40 French Tech 120, like we did an actual survey, are full remote, like full. So I don't know which one. Maybe you're speaking to like the other 40%, but.
Tell me about. You said at the beginning that when you arrived, not even when you arrived, before when the launch of French Tech, part of it was to sort of solve the French bashing that's coming also from French people.
Yeah.
Has it changed? Is it better now?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. So there's what people say, right? And we see tons of like French people that are becoming excellent ambassadors of the French tech ecosystem, and that's great. But what I'm really interested in is what they're doing. And what they're doing is, one, they're coming home. We had an enormous wave of French tech entrepreneurs, employees over the last 18 months who just sort of came back into France. I had this really cool chat actually with our consul in San Francisco, and he told me that about 1,500 French people had left within the last 6 months. Have left San Francisco in the last 6 months. Yeah, that's crazy.
But they're not the only one. A lot of people left SF.
That's true. A lot of people are leaving SF, and a lot of them are for the French people. A lot of them are coming to France. You're also seeing a lot of different movement in terms of angel investing. You have a lot of French entrepreneurs abroad that are investing quite heavily in the ecosystem today, and you see them in the cap tables. When you suddenly get surprised when you see so startup raise, and then you're like, oh, so and so is in the cap table. That's awesome. So that's happening as well. And also something that I'm personally excited about seeing is more and more French people from abroad joining French startups as employees, and that is a massive act of faith, I would say, and that just shows to what extent the ecosystem has really changed.
What's crazy is that whenever you have an announcement of the French government to support startups, you will see some critics online, and when you go abroad and you talk to other ecosystems, they are desperate to have such a support, like such an active, involvement, or an umbrella brand, or whatever you call it, And French Tech was definitely one of the first to have this sort of visibility abroad.
Yeah, it's really funny because like when we talk about French bashing, mostly by French people, there's a part of me that's like, oh, will you please stop, because you're like you're killing my vibe or something like that. But there's a part of me that's like, what? That's just how French people are. They're like. They have such high expectations for anything that is needed for whether it's for themselves, for their governments, for their administration, or anything like that. So there's a certain part of that feels normal as well. But also we have been notoriously pretty terrible at marketing, to be honest. Have we done a pretty stand-up job of making sure our startups are visible, the ecosystem is visible? Yes. Do people today still think that we only work 35 hours
yes, they do.
a week, that people can't take calls over the weekend, that nobody ever can get fired in France, that taxes are higher than they are in California, things like that? Yes. So I think there's still quite a lot of work to be done to show what France has become.
And one of the things you're doing probably is with the Next 40 and FT 120. Tell me a little bit more about this program and why you created this. Maybe to give even more visibility to those successes that are coming out of France.
More than visibility. So this is really like, at the end of the day, this is just pure tactics. The CEO of French Tech, right? The real CEO, not me, but the president essentially, President Macron, put down objectives for us to hit, and he said, we need you to make sure that we can get 25 unicorns by 2025, not at the price of diversity, inclusion, gender balance, or the environment, right? And we were like, okay. I think when that happened, we were like at 7, and we're like, okay, so how are we going to get there? And then eventually, like, what, this is a pipeline, this is a pipeline issue, and this is a short-term issue. We're talking about 2025. So what, there probably aren't 15,000 potential unicorns in France. Maximum, they're probably 120, right? So then we were like, well, who are these 120 companies, and what's preventing them from sort of like breaking that glass wall, so to speak? And we realized 2 things. One, that we weren't exactly sure who those 120 were, right? Objectively speaking, like you hear a lot about startups in the press, but you don't know if they're really killing it in terms of numbers or what the real potential is. And 2, that we had been so focused during the first 2 years of French Tech on startup creation that we were way less versed on like what are the challenges that startups face when they're scaling super fast, at like sort of like Series C, D, E level and things like that. So we created this program, which is essentially a marketplace. So the top 120 startups in France joined this marketplace to an entire collection of different perks that are offered by the French government. So I'll give you an example to be really concrete. So we have 50 different French Tech correspondents all across the government. And let's say you're a startup in the next 40 and you need to secure, I don't know, like your import-export operation, and it's like a mess because of Brexit. Well, then we'll have the French Tech correspondent from customs work with you hand in hand to make sure it goes really smoothly. Pre-COVID, if you were doing biz dev in China and it was really important to you, we would put you on the president's plane on an official trip to China to be able to make that happen. So anyway, you have 120. They work with 4 people in my team who we call startup success managers, essentially like handle their accounts, and who plug you right into those 50 or so different correspondents.
I feel like I should ask you how much it costs to do something like that, but maybe it's not something you can share.
No, we're the government. Of course we can be transparent about numbers. So if I were to give you total numbers.
I think of people abroad, who are like want to imitate what you're doing, and I know a bunch of them. Tell them how much does it cost to do that?
Well, okay, first of all, you know how many we are, right? How big is my team, Ben?
Not that big.
Not that big, right? So actually, full-time, there are 10 of us. Part-time, if you include people who are part-time, there are 15. But I think the real magic of French Tech inside government aren't those 10 or 15 people, even though we are pretty magical. It's the fact that we're able to bring together, because of the leadership of the president, because of the leadership of Cedric O, we're able to bring together all of the different ministries and all together. So that is priceless. Now, for the things that actually have a price tag, French government invests roughly 1.3 billion in startups every year, directly or indirectly, whether that's through fund of funds or different subsidies. We're one of the countries that invest the most in our tech ecosystem in that regard. The team has an operational budget, of roughly 5 million annual, voted by Parliament and so on, not excluding the programs, specific programs that we have that have independent budgets. So I'll give you an example. My personal favorite program is not actually the French Tech Next 40 120. My personal favorite is another program called French Tech Tremplin, which is a program for diversity, and it is funded at 15 million for 2 different seasons. It's the program that essentially helps us make sure that we can scout and integrate some of the best possible entrepreneurs, but that come from communities that are super far from tech, like the refugees, like the inner cities of France, rural areas, and things like that.
You've done already like what, 1 or 2 seasons?
So we've done season 1.
So you've done season 1.
Season 1. So currently there are so just so you and the startup Sesame community knows how it works. We have it's in 2 phases. Usually have kind of like a boot camp phase where you want to make sure that people who are really like not sure how this all works get a sort of crash course in entrepreneurship. And then you have the second part where they're actually in incubators and accelerators. And so that part is ongoing right now, and we have 200 different founders as part of this program.
Thank you. What's coming up in the Q3, Q4 for French Tech?
Well, so what I'm excited about is a new program that was announced not too long ago, and will be unveiling soon with the 20 chosen, which is called French Tech for the Planet, or Green Tech, French Tech Green Tech 20, which is our new program, but specifically for startups that are making a potentially like really massive impact when it comes to climate change. So that one we're really excited about. And a lot of work that we're doing right now is also focused on impact. So we have a board which is called the Impact Board. Not a lot of creativity there. The Impact
Great
Board
name.
of the Next 40, French Tech 120. And what I'm excited about is that we're working with lots of different founders. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a different framework or different standard for impact that is actually attainable by the top 120 companies in France. And that's something that will be released in June.
So for June, second half of the year, anything you can unveil?
Oh,
No?
you know, as politicians.
They don't want to
Not
let you.
for now, no.
They don't let you.
No spoilers.
Look, you have, this stage, as you know, is also made for event organizers, and I would like to, if you could, look at the camera. What do you want to ask them? What is your call to action to event organizers after this crazy year? What do you want to tell them? Is there anything, any message for
don't give
our
up,
fans?
please. I know it's been really rough. Like, as Ben knows, we support a lot of different tech organizers here in France, and I know like the last few months have been brutal. But if there's anything that I can say right now is that tech needs events. It needs to meet people. People need to meet people that they wouldn't normally meet. Like, I hear some really horrible things from VCs these days. I'm going to share a story with you, which I'm sure you've all heard, right? Which is like when you tell them, it's like, hey, isn't it great now that everything is online and you can finally invest in companies from all over, as opposed to investing in companies that are just like in your immediate vicinity. And that's what you would expect, right? And what they tend to do is, because of all of this uncertainty, they'll invest in companies that they know,
they already know.
that they already know, or that that are similar to them, or whatever. Which sucks for diversity, which sucks for inclusion, which means that lots of really great founders in cities or in other hubs that aren't as central as, say, like Paris, Berlin, or London. I mean, the ecosystem is missing out on that. And I think event organizers in tech have a massive role, and have traditionally played a massive role in making sure that this ecosystem is as open, as diverse, and really as inclusive as possible. And we need you to really get back on track on that as soon as possible.
Thank you. There is one more question I wanted to ask, and it is also like I feel like we used to see each other a lot, at events, right?
I know, so sad.
But that's the thing. It's a recurring topic among our community, as you know, because it's a community of people who like to shake hands and give hugs and sing at karaoke and all that thing, right? It's really, really special. And unless you're part of this, it's kind of awkward to know. But it's true that there is an element around the startup founder journey where going to those events, maybe the first event we go to find your next, your CTO, your co-founder will be at a small event locally. And then when you're going to grow, you're going to go abroad to, maybe present your company at CES. You're going to do that with the support of, maybe some government organization and so on. So basically, there is definitely a journey around entrepreneurship with events. That's something we've been working on a lot ourselves. Maybe that's a big long intro to my question. You like events, you love them. What is your perspective, around French founders and entrepreneurs? Do they like event as well? Maybe it's a tricky question. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, you can just start by looking at numbers of like event platforms that don't necessarily have an online component and things like that, and it'll give you an idea of what the traction is and how excited people are for events to get started up again. I mean, look, like the truth is that it depends on the founder. Sometimes events are this horrible distraction, and sometimes you see founders on stage and you're like, get back to work. What are you doing here? And then sometimes, you're like, oh, it's so great that that they're taking the time to really sort of share their experience and what they're doing with lots of other founders, or that we're able to showcase like how quickly ecosystems are moving, how we can sort of share and things like that. But I'm a firm believer that for a lot of founders, the magic is like sometimes like I feel like the stage is like just a really good excuse. And a lot of the magic of events really happens in the corridors and in the meetings and then networking events and the VIP dinners or whatnot, like all of the other side things that are the things that are very difficult to replicate. That where a lot of serendipity happens, whether it's for hiring, whether it's for investing, whether it's for like I don't know, meeting your wife. You know, I mean, I met my husband at a tech. I met my husband at a tech event. Not that that's the most common
Quote,
use case.
that's the quote. Yeah.
Not that that's the most common use case for tech events, right?
Yeah,
But I'm just saying that, you know, a lot of things, like a lot of great things come out of them.
Love it. That's a perfect way, you know, to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Kat, for coming in person here. As I said when you were arriving, you are the only speaker we're having in person. I really, really appreciate you coming, you know, here. This is just starting. I'm going to continue. The next session I have is actually about investors' perspective on French founders. So before, you know, you can stay with me because I'm going to make just the introduction for the next session. It's fully online. We have Chris O'Brien, a good friend, who's going to moderate that. I'm really happy that he's doing this because he's the founder of the French Tech Journal. You want to say something?
That's great. I should say hi. I want to do that awkward thing like, hi, Chris. Okay.
Hi, Chris.
Ahead.
And his speakers, they will discuss, you know, why France becomes such an attractive spot is also because of the interest of international investors in France. And we have 3 of them. And they're going to discuss this with Chris. And I'm looking at the tech, you know, staff. Are we ready to get our next session? We good? Yes, so let's do it.
All right.